My name is Kyle, and it is so good to be with you here at Uplift. This message is going to be on our conversation on Sunday mornings. Glad you're here. If you found us, it's also going to be on our podcast, Anchor Point. This is the final message in our teaching series called The Cast of Christmas. Over the past couple of weeks, we've taken a look at some of the key players in the Christmas story. We've made some observations. I'm glad you're here. If you've missed any of those, you can find those on our website or on our podcast. But I really hope that this series has enhanced, and even tonight will enhance the Christmas season for you and give you some fresh hope in your walk with Jesus. So let's get started. I think we have 3 temptations regarding Christmas. 3 temptations. There are probably a few more. In my observation, I think we have 3, and I want to talk about those just real briefly. Here's the first one. I think the first temptation that we have at Christmas is this: to view Christmas as a mystery to solve. We like to decipher the details. We love articles that pop up in our news feeds regarding Bethlehem or the star or the dates. These are all really intriguing and highly apologetic. They really are. For instance, I want to introduce you to an author. Her name is Rebecca McLaughlin, and she got real famous with a book called Confronting Christianity. She wrote this in 2019. It was published by Crossway and the Gospel Coalition, and it was so profound that it was featured on TED Talk's summer reading list that year, and it was also voted as Book of the Year by Christianity Today. Rebecca McLaughlin is a well-known Christian apologist and defender of the Christian faith. And she's written a book about Christmas. I want to show it to you. It's called Is Christmas Unbelievable? Is Christmas Unbelievable? Highly recommend this book. Really short book. In this book, she frames Christmas through the lens of 4 questions. 4 questions. And she says that everyone should ask these 4 questions about what she calls the world's most famous story. So she asks these questions, and she also answers them by providing some rational reasons to believe that the birth of Jesus actually happened. It's a short book. You can probably read it in 30 minutes. It's not a lot of information there, but what she does include is pretty profound. Here are the 4 questions that she mentions. The first one was Jesus even real? Got to start there. The second one, can we take the Gospels seriously? The third one, how can you believe in a virgin birth? And the fourth one is, why does it matter? She goes right through all of these questions. Again, recommend you reading this book. She does this with great care, easy reading, great footnotes. And I'm just going to kind of present to you first that even though we're talking about being tempted by Christmas being only a mystery, these are good questions. These are good questions. We should answer these questions. More than that, we should want to answer these questions. And really, we should have answers available to these questions when people ask us. And this book might help you do that. It might help you do that. It's okay to answer these questions, and it's okay to ask them. It's okay to want them answered. But it's still a temptation regarding the season to highlight the story of Jesus' birth as only a mystery to be solved. Some of us do that. It's a story with which we must grapple apologetically, but listen, it's more than a puzzle. It's more than a puzzle. Here's the second temptation. I think it's this. It's to keep Christmas seasonal. To examine the birth of Jesus and Advent only in December. And believe it or not, we get a little help with this one. Businesses help us a lot. You've probably heard of this. I want to show it to you. It's called the Christmas creep. You heard of that? Christmas creep. It's a pretty famous phrase, by the way. What it is it's a way that businesses prolong the season by creeping Christmas into other times of the year. When you go to buy Halloween candy and there are Christmas decorations next to it, that's called the Christmas creep. That's what it means. It's a way to prolong sales for retailers. Not a bad thing. People like to make money. It started, though, in the 1880s in Kansas City, Missouri, and in Salt Lake City, Utah. Businesses advertised buying Christmas gifts in October. Franklin Roosevelt, while he was president, actually moved Thanksgiving back a week to prolong holiday sales. And 23 years ago, in the year 2000, Home Depot and Lowe's were the first of the modern era to put out and display Christmas trees on October the 1st. Other businesses followed. Happens all the time now. In other words, we do actually think about Christmas earlier, but maybe we do only because of the gifts and the deadlines. And I think it's true that the story of Jesus' advent, it's not to be limited to just a season or to capitalism. It's much bigger than that. Here's the third temptation. The third temptation, I think, is to romanticize the Christmas story. I mean, we really like the sterile version of Christmas. We like the Silent Night, oh little town of Bethlehem version of Christmas, because in this version, Mary smiles, Joseph, her valiant protector, watches over her as she holds a sleeping baby. There are cute animals around the new family. There are angels singing somewhere, serenading them. Visitors come. It's a party. It's a celebration. And as the song says, all of this is calm and all of this is bright. And look, if this is our entry into the Christmas story, that's great. Let it be so. It's a great launching pad to share the gospel. You and I know, though, that there's so much more to the story of Christmas than just everything being calm and bright. You probably know this guy. I want to show you his picture. His name is Dietrich Bonhoeffer. Probably heard of Dietrich Bonhoeffer. Preachers talk about him a lot, rightly so. Read his books. He's a German. He was a German theologian and pastor in the middle part of the 20th century. He was a pacifist as well, and he really feared his own conscription into the German army for the Nazis in World War II. He spoke against Hitler, spoke against the Nazi regime. He knew what would soon happen. In the late 1930s, he took a trip to America. And he was actually tempted to stay, but he realized if he was going to be an effective pastor and leader, he would have to experience all the hurt that was coming to Germany with the people that he would soon lead. So he returned to Germany. He knew exactly what was coming. He could see it. He could feel it. And in 1940, when he returned to Germany, he sent his parents a Christmas card. And on the front of the Christmas card was this painting. It's the nativity scene painted by Albrecht Altdorfer, and this painting was painted in 1511. 1511. Now, in this painting, you can see the Holy Family there, huddled in a house that actually looks a little bit like a bomb shelter, like it's been bombed. And they were the only survivors. There's a reason why Bonhoeffer picked this card. And inside the card, he wrote this note to his parents. Christmas comes even in the midst of rubble. This is not a romanticized Christmas. Bonhoeffer knew that the squeaky clean version of the Advent would be no help to those who were afraid. And again, this from a man who, as we know now, leaned heavily into Advent and the hope that it offered during the years before and after his arrest by the Nazi regime. The story of the birth of Jesus is real. It's messy. And because of that, it's incredibly relevant. Jesus was born into great peril. And he did that all to become human to save you and me. Not everything in the story was calm or bright. Much like our own stories and our own lives, not everything in our lives today is calm or bright. It's tempting to lean into the Christmas Carol version of this story and to never fully engage in its enormous claims that God became a specific human, born a king of the world that he created. And listen to me, that king will be received. That king will be received. Jesus is too big for the songs that proclaim his birth, and he's too big for the pages that tell his story. He's God, and he will be received, period. And it's with this kind of confidence that Paul wrote these words to the Philippian church. And you can find this in Philippians chapter 2, verses 10 and 11. At the name of Jesus, every knee should bow in heaven and on earth and under the earth, and every tongue confess that Jesus Christ is Lord, to the glory of God the Father. This was not an original thought with Paul, because Isaiah wrote the same thing 700 years before. In Isaiah chapter 45, verse 23, as he transcribed the words of God. Listen to this, what God says: by myself I have sworn, because you can't swear by anybody else. From my mouth has gone out in righteousness a word that shall not return. And then God says through Isaiah, to me every knee shall bow and every tongue shall swear allegiance. Listen, God is a God with which you cannot trifle. Can't do it. His steadfast word is sure, and it will come to pass. It will come to pass. And it is with this kind of confidence that Paul leaned into Isaiah's words spoken by God and made them real for this man, Jesus. It's another way in which Paul affirmed that Jesus is God. Jesus is God, since you can only claim allegiance to one thing above all others. And listen, however you view God, whether you have been a believer in God and a follower of Jesus for decades, or you're new to the faith, or you're even an atheist, I want you to be certain that still today, Jesus the King demands a response from you. He does. Matthew shows us this in his gospel, in the very first reactions to Jesus after Jesus was born. We find these reactions, these receptions, immediate into how earth receives Jesus. Let's read this together. This is from Matthew chapter 2. We're going to read the first 12 verses. Now, after Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea in the days of Herod the king, behold, Magi from the east came to Jerusalem, saying, "Where is he who has been born King of the Jews? For we saw his star when it rose. We come to worship him." Now, when Herod the king heard this, he was troubled, and all Jerusalem with him, and assembling all the chief priests and scribes of the people, he inquired of them where the Christ was to be born. And they told him, "In Bethlehem of Judea, for so it's written by the prophet, and you, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are by no means the least among the rulers of Judah, for from you shall come a ruler who will shepherd my people Israel." Verse 7, then Herod summoned the Magi secretly and ascertained from them what time the star appeared. And he sent them to Bethlehem, saying, "Go and search diligently for the child, and when you found him, bring me word that I too may come and worship him." After listening to the king, they went on their way. And behold, the star that they had seen when it rose went before them until it came to rest over the place where the child was. And when they saw the star, they rejoiced exceedingly with great joy. Look how Matthew doubles that up. Rejoiced exceedingly with great joy. Verse 11, and going into the house, they saw the child with Mary his mother, and they fell down and they worshiped him. Then opening their treasures, they offered him gifts, gold, and frankincense, and myrrh. And being warned in a dream not to return to Herod, they departed to their own country by another way. Now, in this story, we find that Jesus as king is received two ways. And I want you to listen to me. This is pretty clear. There are only two ways to receive Jesus. There are only two ways. Now, there may be subsets of these, and you might be able to argue about it. That's fine. But Matthew's immediate placement of the response of both the Magi and Herod was his way to show that there are only two ways to receive King Jesus. We're going to talk about them both. Let's start with the first one. First is with the Magi. You can receive your king with seeking. Now let's talk about the Magi. First, here's what we know about them. They traveled. Pretty simple. In fact, Matthew says that they traveled from the east. Here's why. If you rewind the tape of history for a while, several hundred years before this, Magi were originally advisors to the Persian kings. That was their original job, way before the birth of Jesus. Now, the Persian Empire had fallen several years before Jesus was born, but what remained of it was in Babylonia. And Babylonia was from the east. It was east of Palestine. It was east of Judea. It was the seat of the since overthrown Persian Empire. That's where they came from. At least that's what we assume, because they came from the east. But I also want you to know this, that their point of origin is also Matthew's way of telling us that they were not Jewish people. That's important. Jesus' birth had opened the world to the possibility that a non-Jewish person could honor and worship a Jewish king. Big deal. So they determined Jesus' location through gazing at the stars. They were looking for something greater. And their stargazing actually betrays that. Now, we're not given any more specific information about the star that they saw. It's just not there. Only that they followed its direction. In fact, the Greek text of the gospel doesn't even say that the star pointed at the house where Jesus was, or it led the Magi on some specific roadmap. It just doesn't say that. Now, and whether or not it was a natural occurrence or a miraculous one, let's be honest, the text could mean either of those. We're not told. It's not the point. Because what the point is that for Gentiles who sought magic arts and divination and astrology for signs, who were, by default, antithetical to the purposes of God, sought something they didn't understand, and they got their stuff together, and they made haste to find it. They went on a journey to find Jesus. That's the point. That's the point. And they met him, they received him with an attitude of seeking through multiple obstacles of distance and culture, who, once they saw the king, they prostrated themselves in a house in the middle of nowhere and rejoiced to find Jesus. They were large enough and had enough presence to have an audience with Herod the Great. This caravan showed up at this little house and bowed before Jesus. The very people who could command an audience with Herod disregarded Herod and honored the baby Jesus born a king. They received Jesus with seeking. They were going to do what they had to do to find him. But we got to talk about Herod, right? Got to talk about Herod. This other king in the story, right? He represents the second reception of the king, and his presence, it looms large in this story. I'll tell you a little bit about Herod, all right? He was named king of Judea in 40 BC by the Roman Senate. A little bit of history for you. And his rule began with great administration and construction. He built the temple that's featured in the New Testament. In his latter years, around the time that Jesus was born, he suffered some sort of illness, and that illness made him completely paranoid. And it turned him into a murdering tyrant. He killed his associates, those closest to him, killed his wife, and he killed at least 2 of his sons, afraid of them taking his reign. And what's very important about Herod is that as the king of the Jews, quotes, he was not a Jewish person. He had no ancestral claim to the throne he occupied. He wasn't Jewish. So someone born or adopted into the lineage of David had a greater ancestral claim to the throne of the Jewish people than that of Herod. And this vulnerability, it made him very dangerous. And it shows us the second way to receive King Jesus, and it's this, with scheming. With scheming. Herod's personal disturbance at this, Matthew says, set the whole city on edge. This is the kind of guy he was. If he's upset, everybody's afraid. That's what's going on. So what did he do? Well, let's read. Matthew chapter 2, verses 7 and 8. Then Herod summoned the Magi secretly and ascertained from them what time the star had appeared. And he sent them to Bethlehem, saying, "Go and search diligently for the child, and when you found him, you bring me word that I too may come and worship him." He preferred here to manipulate the Magi, meeting with them secretly. He's scheming. He's trying to get some information in undercover ways. In fact, Matthew tells us more about Herod's scheming. Let's keep going. Matthew chapter 2, we're going to start in verse 13. After the Magi had gone, an angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph. Remember in the story, they were warned to not return to Herod. So they're going back a different way from where they came. So after the Magi had gone, returned, an angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream and said, "Get up, take the child and his mother and flee to Egypt and stay there until I tell you, for Herod is going to look for the child to kill him." Verse 14, and Joseph got up, took the child and his mother during the night, and they went to Egypt. And he stayed there until Herod died. In this way, what was spoken by the Lord through the prophet was fulfilled. "I called my son out of Egypt." Look, it probably didn't take long for Herod's order to happen, to go to Bethlehem and kill Jesus. Bethlehem was only 5 miles away from Jerusalem, half a day's walk. By all historical accounts, Bethlehem was a really small village. So in this slaughter of the innocents, that's what it's called, maybe less than a dozen children were killed. But this is what Herod did. He went to kill children. His startling response to the king and how he received it shows us how I think a lot of people receive Jesus. I mean, first you want some information. It's normal. So did the Magi. In that regard, the Magi and Herod had all that in common. They needed information. And Herod wanted information with skepticism. And that's not always bad either. People want to know. Herod's initial questions about the times of the star and the time of Jesus' birth, it's a gateway to apologetics, even today. It's what it is. But he also responded next with some manipulation. His evolving response attests to this. It's with manipulation and then killing. And look, we've not killed people, I hope, but our response to Jesus, or at least the response of people we know, has been very similar. Often, we start there. How can I not follow Jesus? If there's something I really want to do, I've asked that question. How can I get around this? I know what Jesus is calling me to, but I don't know if I want to do that. That seems really hard, and I have to swallow my pride. I have to humble I don't want to do that. How can I not follow Jesus? How can I just ignore him? I'm scheming. I'm skeptical. I don't know if this is actually real. How can I be completely immune to Jesus' calling on me for morality? Can I put Jesus to death in my life? Can I kill him? Get him out of the picture? This is what it means to receive Jesus with scheming. Look, either of those responses are possible, even for you, even today. You might be a believer, but you still receive Jesus with either seeking or scheming. And you may not believe. If you don't believe, you can still seek Jesus. You can be receptive to his advent and to his kingship, and you can seek him. And when you seek him, according to Jeremiah, when you seek him, you'll find him if you seek him with all of your heart. But I want to leave you with something in this series, something a little different. We're going to close this series and this message with this exhortation, that you don't need a star to find Jesus. You don't need a star to find Jesus. Let me show you what I mean. We're going to read and close this message in this series by reading from the letter written to the Hebrews. This is from Hebrews chapter 10. We're going to begin in verse 32. The writer says this, but recall the former days when, after you were enlightened, it's a big word, you endured a hard struggle with sufferings, sometimes being publicly exposed to reproach and affliction and sometimes being partners with those so treated. For you had compassion on those in prison, and you joyfully accepted the plundering of your property, since you knew that you yourselves had a better possession and an abiding one. Therefore, do not throw away your confidence, which has a great reward. The writer strikes an encouraging tone here. This is a hard struggle. Life is hard. Following Jesus is sometimes very hard. Very hard. Very hard. If it's not happening to you, if the struggle's not yours, it's with somebody you know and you're standing with them. In fact, the Greek language here in the first verse, in verse 32, can literally be translated. In our version, it was translated as a hard struggle, but the word actually literally translated as a contest, like an athletic contest. In fact, it's the only time in the New Testament that word shows up. It's a contest with suffering. It's tough. If you've ever played sports, you know what that feels like. It's a battle. That's what the writer calls this life of following Jesus. But he also says that this contest can be endured with joy. What an oxymoron. You better believe it, Ken, when you know that you've already won. Yes, that's joyful. And he says this for one particular reason, that you can endure it because you've been enlightened. Enlightened. Now, the Greek word for this, I want to show it to you, it's photizo. You recognize this word. It's the word we use for our modern words of photography and photograph. And it has a particular meaning. It's to render something evident. It's already there. It's not manifesting anything. It's just making you able to see it. That's what this means. Being enlightened doesn't mean that something just kind of grows inside of you. It means that the light switch is turned on in a dark room and you can see the chair that was there in the dark, but now you can see it in the light. That's what he means by being enlightened. But it's not a star in the night sky that enlightens you. That's not what lights our way. The readers of this letter and us, the readers of this letter in particular, they didn't see it, not a star. What they saw was this, the absolute reality that the present world of culture and politics and government is vastly inferior to what is lasting. That's what they saw. That's what they saw. That's what the writer says. They had a better possession and an abiding one. It's in verse 34. In other words, they knew that, and they're like, take my stuff. You want to come after me? Take it. Take it all. Take my life if you want. You can have it. You can have it. Because I know that what I have in Jesus can never be taken. That's what they saw. They saw that. And that's what allowed them to suffer with joy. And let me give you another little practical thing that they saw. Most scholars say that this letter was written to people who lived in Jerusalem. You know what they saw? Every day, if they wanted to, not a star, but they saw an empty tomb. They knew exactly where it was. They could walk past it. And they knew, because that tomb was empty, that life does not meet its limits here. Not even death, not even their deaths. They are not afraid to die anymore. Not their deaths at the hands of oppressors or persecutors could keep them from Jesus. And death can't keep you from Jesus either. I want you to see, and I want you to seek not just the baby in the manger, but the King in heaven, and await his return. Receive your King with seeking.